So our start. So, a very welcome to all of you at Women Without Borders. I start again because we're streaming. I'm sorry, we have to do it properly. So, a very warm welcome to all of you here at Women Without Borders. Thank you for joining the open house. Thank you for joining the open house talk today. We have three discussants. We have two esteemed panelists, and we have an expert in an engaging discussion with the two panelists. So I would like to welcome both of you, the panelists. So it is Archana Kapoor and it is Sanjay Kapoor. They are both our long-term partners over many years. We did programs in India with Archana. And of course, we interacted a lot with her expert husband, and we're very, very, very privileged to have him here today. And then Billy Badware, thank you so much for leading this conversation here today. Billy is a program officer at UNODC and a continuous ally of Women Without Borders. So thank you for leading the discussion. And we're all looking forward to an engaging dialogue today. We're here today in the context of the 30th anniversary of the Vienna World Conference on Human Rights. I think this is very important to add and to the introduction. And in that context, I would also like to thank the Ministry for Foreign Affairs who invited us to kind of contribute to the human rights discussion. And they're supporting this empowering dialogue today. And I do think in an overall polarized world, it is increasingly important that we create platforms for exchange, platforms for dialogue. Discussions are critical because these discussions like today, they help us to face challenges and uncertainties and what is our methodology, what is our approach? It's critical thinking. Exchanges like this today, I hope, will give us actually the hope to build a better world together. So this is a safe and judgment-free space tonight, and let's use it. I would like to introduce briefly our two esteemed panelists. Archana, as I said, a long-term partner and friend. She is a social activist in the best sense. I have visited many of your programs, Archana. You are a community broadcaster, the founder of SMART, which is a non-profit that has been educating, empowering communities across the country. And I think it is a network of over 400 community radio stations. This is amazing. The founder of the national award-winning community radio station, Radio Mewat, and the tagline of your work is providing voice to the voiceless. I think one can't say it more beautiful, Archana, and this is what you do since decades. Sanjay is an Indian broadcaster, a very well-known figure, expert, traveler across the whole region, the neighboring countries, and across India, a journalist, editor, director of the Hard News magazine, a 20-year-old publication which survived and which I think is very critical. Not easy to be critical in these times, but I think you persevere and you continue. He has been the General Secretary of the Editors Guild of India, and you're an expert on national international affairs. And I think this is an incredible privilege tonight to listen to these voices from the South, to better understand each other. And I would like to focus on listening, engaging, and learning from each other. So, Billy, over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Edith, please welcome, and a round of applause to Edith. Thank you so much, Edith, and of course your team for welcoming us here, warmly welcoming us here in your house, and for giving us this space for dialogue and conversation. I think we can all use this space, especially in this environment. So let me just start by quoting one of the American feminists and activist, Gloria Steinem.
I know.
You know her very well. And I think her quote, I chose this quote very carefully given today's discussion, because I think her quote summarizes today's discussion actually quite well. And she said, "The story of women's struggle for equality belongs to no single feminist, nor to any one organization, but to the collective effort of all who care about human rights." And I think this is really a good summary of today. So with that, thank you so much for bringing us here to discuss this. And when we discuss about issues of human rights and gender rights and human rights in general, I think we can go back and look at Mahatma Gandhi and his approach to life and human rights in general. We can look at the United Nations itself and look at the UN Charter and what it says about human rights and protection of rights. And we can look at, certainly, as you mentioned, we're meeting at this, in the context of this anniversary, we can look at the Universal Declaration for Human Rights. And we find a lot of principles and guidance on this as well. So I don't think we are running, we are in shortage of the principles on human rights and policies and the instruments on human rights. I think the question that we are asking ourselves is, in the presence of all those principles and instruments, why do we still have to talk about the lack of human rights and inequalities among men and women? And I think this is really what brings us here today. And so a word from the United Nations, obviously I cannot disassociate myself from the United Nations. Our work as a UN is anchored in human rights principles. In every aspect of the work that we do, the core principle that we base ourselves on is human rights. And now we have a Secretary General who is very committed, not only to the human rights in general, but also to women's rights. I'm happy to report that today, the UN has achieved what we call gender parity, not at the lowest level of the organization, at the senior management of the organization. And this is very encouraging. The UN, usually when we talk about gender equality, you find women in lower levels of work, but not at the management and decision-making levels. So for today, I think we could not have asked for better speakers and discussants to help us to discuss this particular topic of today. They have already been introduced, but I will start with Achana. You have been in this business of civil society, working with UN institutions for over 25 years. And we know that in general, even at the UN, no government alone can act on any issues, let alone issues of human rights, that are sustainable, that are long-term, that are effective, without the involvement of civil society. In fact, I think we have seen that civil society has been at the forefront of inspiring even the UN, the institution, the UN the UN itself, and the Universal Declaration for Human Rights. So the question, I think, remains, why do we still have the shortage of space for civil society to act, knowing that they make a very important contribution. From the Global South perspective, if you could reflect a little bit, what is the missing piece here when we think about this issue of human rights and women's rights and the protection of human rights and the involvement of civil society? What is the missing piece? And what is required for us to make the progress that is so much needed?
Thank you for that. And first of all, thank you, Women Without Borders, and Edith for having us here. This is the first time I'm on a panel with my husband. So it's pretty challenging as it is.
There's a great amount of nervousness which is also flowing out because I've never been on a panel with her.
I know. We do our own things and we are never together. Only at home we are together. But, and we have different ways of looking at things. And obviously, because I'm a woman and he's a man.
I'm afraid that how she will judge me when I'm through with this program.
But the fact of the matter is that we start with gender parity from here. So, you know, I think that you may have a lot of documents, you may have charters, you may have millennium goals, you may have the SDGs. After 2030, we will start again. We will maybe have another set of goals. But we don't look at people at the center. We do not put women at the center. We decide for women without having women. I'm so happy to see so many women here, actually. I have been in conferences where I have asked women to raise their hands. And there are 5 women or 7 women. I have been on panels where I am the only woman. So I think the change starts not with civil society, but with the institutional infrastructure, the structures, the patriarchal structures which we have created. And UN is not, you know, in any way away from all this. You are saying that, I believe you when you say that you have more women at the top. Though I find it a little difficult, but still I will believe you. I will take
that
you.
I can prove.
I will take you on your word. You look at it all around. And as you rightly said, that women are the low-hanging fruits. You know, you can push them anywhere. When you need women, you just get 100 women in India. I'm talking about India. It's very easy to get 100 women when you need to talk about women. You talk about women to women. We work in silos. We haven't broken the walls. And whenever there is a women's conference, it's only women. And this is one thing which I keep talking about. If we are talking to ourselves, how will we look at the change? The men need to talk about what they're doing to women, how they're shrinking our spaces. We as civil society members are facilitators, conveners, advocates, even service providers. But the context in which we work is so dynamic. It is so changing, it's changing so rapidly. And it's for us to keep on adapting to these requirements. Today there is some other issue, and we have not brought those issues to the table. The issues have come from different social contexts. They've come from different policies at the government level. And they have been discussed in the UNGA, they have been discussed at the UNCSW, they have been discussed everywhere. But then when they finally come down, there's very little which is happening on the ground. And if I may start with just one point, and I'll stop here, is access. To bring about equality, you have to have the right access for women.
Are you saying then there's not sufficient space for women at the table? Access to the table where the decisions are being made?
No, there isn't, because, and I'm sorry to say this, and I don't know, I may not be appreciated for what I'm saying, but the women who've reached the top, they lock the door behind them. They themselves do not leave the doors open for more women to come in.
Why?
Because there is so much insecurity, there is such little space. They've struggled so hard to reach there. It is not transparent. There is no transparency. There is no effort to bring women to the table. You discuss peace without women. You discuss education without women. You discuss poverty without women. Everyone knows that poverty has a woman's face. But where are the women? Look at the hunger index. Look at the refugee index. Look at everything that is happening. And it's not women who have contributed to it. It is the patriarchal setup of society which looks at power and in which they do not want to share power. So till you do not open the doors for all, till you do not give them education, opportunities for employment. But having said that, let me tell you that, and I want to take from where Edith left and what you also said, is that When we look at civil society, we have to adopt very rapidly. You look at COVID. What did we invest in? We didn't invest in basic health. We invested in technology. Whenever we talk, we invest in data, we invest in technology. Women do not have access to technology. They are not trained for that. So if you do not provide a level playing field, you will always increase the divide. And women will always be left behind. And the time, as we see it today and whatever is happening around us, I think that this is the beginning for me, where we have to look at international organizations, we have to look at governments, we have to look at civil society, we have to look at communities, we have to come together, because these are global problems. Our solutions may be local, but we need inspiration from people like who are present in this room, from people like Women Without Borders. I'm running an NGO in India. I need these stories of inspiration to carry on. The hope comes from outside. And the contexts have changed, and they have transcended the societal, the traditional boundaries. So I think if we look at civil society, we cannot work in silos, we cannot work in isolation. We have to come together to look at local solutions for global issues.
And I'm really happy that you mentioned that, because I think when we think about human rights, especially women's rights, I think we sometimes fix it, right? We are fixated on the gender aspect of the topic, and we forget that gender rights, women rights, and women rights are actually social, economic rights. We're talking about political rights. You mentioned about access, and I want to follow up on that. There are also economic issues. And when you leave 50% of the global population out, you're losing out on 50% of the opportunities to increase your economic growth, job opportunities, education, as you said. So basically, it's a losing game that we're playing. But I found it very interesting what you mentioned about those women who managed to make it into the system at the decision-making level, that they close the doors. What does that say then to our collective efforts to making sure that they get there? Do you see hope moving forward as we increase the number? Perhaps it's happening because we don't have enough of them in those spaces. I mean, what is your reflection on that? Is it a matter of increasing these numbers, or do we need to take a different approach? Is it a conversation that we have to have with them?
I think, as I said, that we need to provide more opportunities. We need to provide more opportunities at the top. A lot of our friends here are journalists. If you look at it, only 38.7% or something are women, and only about, if I'm not mistaken, 10 or 11% are at the top. Why? You know, because they are not given the opportunity. If they are going to cover war, and I have friends, and Sanjay knows them, and they went to cover the war, and they said, you cannot come because you're a woman. And they said, we've flown all these miles to come and cover war. No, it's not safe for women. Why? You're a journalist. You're a journalist first and a woman later, but every time we are made to feel you're a woman first. I have a friend in Afghanistan. There was so much of violence against her. She was running radio stations and everything. And when she protested and she said, what is my fault? They said, you're a woman. So, you know, it's not about leading from the front or leading from the behind. It's just about creating more opportunities for women so that they can reach their full potential and they can have access to the basic rights of education, employment, freedom, mobility. There are so many things which come so naturally to men. But for women, it is a challenge at every step. And that is why, because the ladder, climbing the ladder is such a tough process that those who reach, they think that, you know, it's just their achievement. And if you mentioned Gloria Steinem, and when she said that 50% of the sky belongs to you, just take it, hold it. So that is what, but how do we reach there if we do not get equal opportunities? One of the major things which we are now facing in some of the, in the global south and other places, whether we look at Africa or we look at Asia, everything is going digital. But if you do not have education and if you do not have access to a smartphone, how can you be part of this whole development process? And these are the challenges which need to be addressed so that everybody feels secure. Everybody is an equal partner, and everybody has the right and a transparent system to succeed.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Archana. I hope you're taking notes of all of this, because we will have a conversation with Archana and Sanjay after this. So thank you so much for this. Sanjay, let me bring you in, not to ask you a question that I prepared for you, but to ask you to reflect on this a little bit, because I find it very interesting. What does this say about us as men? What kind of conversation do we need to have with ourselves, but also with our daughters and sons as they're growing up? I mean, could you share some of your reflections on this? And also the men in the room, please.
Yeah,
I mean, take notes, and maybe we can have a conversation around this later.
It's a difficult question to answer for somebody who's been derided and questioned by wife and daughter all the time, that, look here, you need to think differently. So one has been trying to think differently all the years that I've been exposed to Archana's thinking, and that too of my firebrand daughter, who has very strong views on this. But this is a process which has, in a certain way, got hardened, not with me, but with the society at large, primarily because of a breakdown of ideology which provided accommodation for women to take steps to come forward and, do certain things. But, if you look at my own country and the countries in the neighborhood, maybe in Afghanistan for that matter, the war against terror was fought not just to bomb out Osama bin Laden and the Al-Qaeda, but also to protect women of Afghanistan. And you have a situation where Taliban comes back to power in 2021, and the women of Afghanistan are sent back to the dark ages that we never thought they would return to. In fact, I have so many friends, many of them not even known to Archana, who are Afghan ladies, very enterprising and very firebrand in many ways. And they were wondering as to why the United States of America, the international community, just jettisoned them in a manner that they just can't climb back, because it seems like a hopeless situation. And in a certain way, if you look at it, the Taliban is prospering, Taliban ideology is growing, and it means that the women of Afghanistan have no hope in hell to do anything more than that. So coming back to your original question, I believe that the fact that women have not been able to go further than what they have done in the past is also because of how the governments of the day, how the ruling ideology conducts itself. And if they are adamant about it, like they want to give space, like in India there's a major fight which is going on over how much space you need to give them, and the government in the elections, like 33% is what recently the Prime Minister of India announced in the Parliament. It was approved by all the political parties. This is a kind of commitment that everybody shows, but they find it difficult to implement that. Likelihood is that in 2029 this entire accommodation will happen, but you're not very sure it will happen, because in the past also same kind of process was followed, but nothing came out of it. So as I said, it's the government of the day, the ruling ideology that decides. And unhappily, if you look at it, there has been a slide back in ways. Afghanistan is an extreme example, but you have certain forces of, you can say, the right wing, there would be some people will be there, who find that, paying any kind of attention to women's rights doesn't serve their interests at all. And that is where we find many societies gripped with this thought about how much they should do. And it's getting, as I said, worse in the every passing days, despite the fact you look at a country like Bangladesh, you have a lady who's the head of the state. But are things better there? The things are better than India comparatively, primarily because Bangladesh is constructed like that. It's a women-oriented society, and they don't take no for an answer. They keep going for all kinds of things, and that is why they succeed. But the same thing cannot be said about many parts of India. There might be a states like Kerala, where I think Edith also goes for work, which is far different in comparison to the northern part of India where we stay, where women are compelled to live a certain kind of life. And you have in Kerala where women are more outgoing. So if you have a society which accommodates them, which gives them preference, then it happens. If you have a government which doesn't give importance to women's rights, then I can promise you nothing will really happen. It will all become like Talibanized state of affairs like you have in Afghanistan.
So in the end, it comes back to the question, the issue of education. Not just formal education in school, but also the conversations and the education that we have with our children as they grow up. Because I think we have to start when they're still children, especially the boys, How do boys see girls, and therefore how do men see women within the communities, and the roles that those genders play becomes very important. So it becomes a societal issue and a community issue as well. And we see how this plays out. Edith, you've been to Rwanda. I mean, you've seen my own country. I come from Rwanda. We pride ourselves for having a majority of women in policy making. And I'm still keen to really understand what impact this is having, but I'm sure you will be able to educate me a bit more on this than I know. But I think it's a political will issue and it's an education issue. So if politicians are willing to do this, they can put measures in place, at least to help the education part of things.
Billy, I want to add one thing to this. I think it's also a social issue.
It's a social issue.
Because when I work in communities, and when I ask the fathers that why aren't you sending your child for class 10 or college or something, and they say the environment is not good for them. And my question is, who's making this environment? Who's responsible for them, for this environment? It's not safe. From who? So, we have to keep on asking these questions, because when we hold back women in the name of religion, we hold back women in terms of no mobility, we hold back women because there's not adequate infrastructure, we hold back women because there's not enough police. And then, there are so many reasons for keeping the women home, because you have 5 siblings and the eldest is the daughter and she has to look after the rest. So I'm talking about societies which do not have this kind of exposure, who are not from the kind of, it's East and West, so I would say Western societies, where there's still more parity, where there's still more equality. But I see in the East, I see it in India, I see it in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in a lot of places where women are held back at the drop of a hat. Any reason, and women are asked to stay home. We've seen it during COVID. These are the external factors. There are so many girls who are not in school anymore. In India, we worked so hard to bring the girls to school. We had always achieved a 90% enrollment. And now, again, of course, the study hasn't happened, but anecdotally, we see that a lot of girls have not gone back to school. So I think even the society, the people, the communities are equally responsible. And of course, the political will is crucial.
And here again, I would want to reiterate, the government is very important, especially in those places where people are not able to step out, where women are reluctant to send their kids or parents are reluctant to send their kids. It's the government that has to give guarantees. Like it happened many years ago when apartheid was being fought in, southern part of the US, in the state of Arkansas. It's the police, the state guard that stood along with those 5 girls who entered the school. And that is what really changed them. So I think society, as Archana is saying, but a strong government commitment backed by an ideology is going to make a difference. And unhappily, those kind of values are just going away with whatever may be the growing concerns of the political class.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Please, a round of applause to both of them. Thank you. Thank you so much. And you mentioned government, both of you. We now going to look at a topic that, around democracy and democratic values. Because I think when we talk about human rights and women's rights, I think we can agree that they really flourish in open societies. You just mentioned, Tina, West versus East, where you have in the East more, if you want to call it that way, more like conservative approach within societies. Before that, I mean, we used to know democracy, Sanjay, as for the people and by the people, right? I think this is what we all know about democracy. But it seems like when you look around, it seems like it's more in the name of the people at the cost of people. Really, I think this is what it has become. So, and so in that regard, I think what we can all agree is that we see, as both of you actually alluded to a little bit, that we see these camps between the East and the West. And when we look at the democracy, the way the democracy functions in some what we call democratic states, and the actions of those states in other states, there seems to be a disconnect between these two things. So, are we practicing what we're preaching in a way? Is that what, you know? Can we still say that? And what is the role of media in all of this, in upholding freedom of speech and getting the information out to the people, so that, because the issue of education also comes in the political participation as well. What would be the role of the media as well in all of this to educate and inform people about what is happening?
Yeah, it's a question which goes in many directions, but anyways, I would confine it to what I believe in. Next year is very crucial. 2024, we have 76 elections in the world. Out of 76, more than half are what they say less democratic, but still they will have an electoral system where they will elect a party in power to power, or somebody that they want them to come to power. And the big countries which are facing election, United States of America, which is also, in a certain way, their democracy is under strain. Then you have India, you have Russia, you have practically every country that you can think of. What will be the outcome of the elections? Would it change the way? Would it make the world a more participative, more representative place than what it is? Would it improve the lives of the people that we're talking of concerns of Archana and many others in this room, about the safety of women, about the rights of the women? We are not very sure. It will only endorse many strong men that are stalking the political firmament at the moment. They would all become legitimized in some ways to come to remain in power. It might happen in my own country, where we have a gentleman who's been in power for the last 10 years. He could get another term in the next 5 years. Are we better served by his electoral rejuvenation, as you say? We aren't very sure. But the fact of the matter is that the democracy that we have at the moment is not yielding the dividends that we had really thought of. And there are many reasons. And the reasons flow from the fact that, for instance, UN is not performing the way it should have performed. The credibility is very low. People get very disgusted whenever they see a conflict and they find that UN has no solution. They are very disgusted with their leaders who claim to have been elected through democracy, but they are very authoritarian. They do not do anything. In fact, after getting elected, they just forget. They do not go through all the promises they might have made, and they continue to dump or look the people who brought them to power in a different way. So I think it is a challenge which will not be going away anytime soon, primarily because people don't have any clue about how they can resolve the matters at all. Because you said about media. Media is very critical, primarily because it is a big gap in preventing the replication of the kind of democracy that we don't want to have in a country. Like, if we don't want authoritarians to come to power, there should be unrelenting exposure of their deeds and misdeeds, and they should ensure that people who are not aware of what is going on should be brought in, and they should be made conscious of it, and they should, in a certain way, act on it. But it never happens. In a society like India, in the neighborhood where you have Bangladesh, we have elections in January. The United States government has said that anyone try to prevent the voting in Bangladesh would be barred from entering the US. So this is supposed to put the fear of God in the people who are in power in Bangladesh, but that's not enough to stop the, the vote contractors who are there on the ground. I don't think they travel to the US, so they would not be really bothered. Similarly, you have many other individuals who make democracy very illiberal, and they would ensure that they continue to be in power and without really being bothered about what the media is going to say, primarily because media doesn't say anything. They have been compromised to such an extent, primarily because of the strongman leaders who have come in, whether it is in Turkey, whether it is in my own country, whether it is in Bangladesh for that matter. Nothing can be written about it.
Is it by understanding that you're challenging the aspect of democracy that we have?
Yeah, it is.
Is there
Deficit, right?
is the deficit of democracy, democratic principles?
Yes, there is a very manifest democratic deficit which is visible now, primarily because there are certain fundamentals within democracy which do not get played out. You don't have freedom of expression, which is the most critical part of democracy. That never, gets the space that it really needs. Till the time you have freedom of expression, you do not have the kind of political culture that allows people to say or do things that they want without fear of retribution. Till then, I don't think you can have a real democracy. I know in Bangladesh, I go there quite often. You have people who are they don't mind the lady who's in power, but they want a certain kind of political accommodation for the opposition. But anybody who tries to say that the opposition should be given some space is either chased out towards India or to the rest of the world or sent behind bars. There's nobody who has the right to question the party in power there. The same thing is happening in other regions also, good or bad. In India too, to some extent, there is, but there is slightly more liberal. People get blocked out in terms of their voices. Social media is one area where people just get, in a certain way, blocked in a manner that they don't even see what they're writing. They become far more controlled.
How do we make sense of all of this? How do we bring back the excitement about democracy, these democratic values back? How do we motivate the young people to go to vote? I mean, you look around, even in Austria, we're not just talking about India and Bangladesh, and in the US and Austria, we see this, that more and more young people are simply not going to vote.
Barry, but surprisingly, in India, the vote percentage is about 75%. People still step out and vote. It's not they're not voting. But where is it all leading? What kind of thought process is driving people to? It could be cash for votes. People are getting paid to come out and vote. There could be 100 other reasons that may be there. It happens in your country. It happens in other countries of the South. People get paid and they step out and vote. So the standards that may be used for judging loss of voting or lack of voting in the West do not apply with our cases. The vote percentage is growing. You have the electronic voting machines, which I think there's great fascination. People come and press the button. There could be also a desire that a certain person from a particular caste. We have the caste system, which is like the upper caste, the middle caste, the lower caste. They may use that to drive out a certain caste grouping. There could also be the Hindu-Muslim factor, which may be there. And
what is also from a female perspective, as a citizen, as a general citizen, but what is your reflection on this?
So, if I just talk about democracy and voting is a right for everybody in a democracy, and that is one of the pillars of democracy, that you can vote your leader. I have worked very closely with the Election Commission of India on creating voter awareness, on going into these rural communities, looking at access to the voting machines, looking at mobility, and using the social apps which the Election Commission advertises. And there have been villages, and there are some positive stories. Villages where there were, because we have a post-box economy in some of the hill areas, there were only women, there were only 10 voters, and then when they told the community radio there that, we can't come down because it was raining or something. And then they immediately organized something. The Election Commission sent a van. Those women came and voted. So there are these very positive stories in our country where women have come out and, they've exercised their right. And for the first time in the 2019 elections, and I have a letter to prove that, which we got as an appreciation from the Election Commission of India, was that thanks to our efforts, the voting percentage was 67.8%. 67.08 for men and 67.01 amongst women. So I agree with Sanjay that, voting percentage is kind of at par, women also coming out and vote. But again, do they make informed choices? Do they have access to information? Do they know their candidates? Do we invest in that kind of thing? Do we give them the code of ethics? Do we tell them that where you can go and report when you see unethical practices? So for me, and I use information for empowerment, I use information, education, and then empowerment. I think people are where they are because they do not have access to information. We are sitting here because we have access to the internet. We can book our tickets, we can travel, we can find out where Women Without Borders is. But just imagine when millions of people do not have this access, do not have this information, then what equality are we talking about?
I think we need a social media. We need a space during the election phase where there's no social media for socializing, or there's no Netflix or Netflixing or Instagram, but just to educate people.
Just to reach out to them.
Because I think there's an information overload. People are on social media for all kinds of things.
Billy, I disagree with you.
Okay, all right.
I'll tell you why I disagree
Please.
with you. Because if I just give you, I'm not going to make any comment on my country here. And I think we are doing very well. We are very advanced compared to a number of countries. We are providing technology. We are providing, the electronic voting machines. We are providing training. We are going digital in a very big way. But I'll just give you some figures. And these are very authentic figures because I was in a panel just a few days back. We have 800 million people using the smartphone, out of which how many are women? We are just 200 million women with internet connections, but not necessarily have access all the time. There may be one phone in the house. Now, when we talk about social media, I think social media is good for those who have access. I'm sorry for being repetitive, but I'm talking about bridging this divide. The next big divide, we will be talking about the digital divide. We have become so data friendly. We talk as if we are the world. We are just a very small part of this population. And it's globally. It's not only in India, it's not only in Bangladesh, it's not only in Pakistan or Sri Lanka or wherever. We work with rural communities. Look at Indonesia, look at a number. The phone industry is doing very well. But who has access to this phone?
Exactly.
It's very important.
Exactly.
It's the man in the house.
I'm glad you disagreed with me. I always just think that it's also, yes, it's a question of access, but it's also a question of when you have that access, what are you doing with it? What is it exactly
How
that you're looking at?
it?
When you have that particular phone, are you actually politically educating yourself, or socially educating yourself, economically educating yourself?
Or even entertaining yourself.
Or just entertaining yourself at Netflixing and Instagramming and TikToking, right? All of those things. So I think that's part of that as well. Thank you so much to both of you for that. I have one more question, and we will open the floor for a discussion with you. And I really hope that there will be a lot of discussion because there's so many interesting topics that are being discussed. I would be very keen to hear, they're bringing this South perspective. How is this working out in Austria and in the Western part on this very topic? So, Archana, let me just turn back to you. We've discussed a lot, deficit, human rights, women's rights, deficit in democratic exercise and enjoyment. If I would come to you and say, tell me what I should do. We know the issues, we know the problems, we know the challenges. What can I do? What advice would you give me? What can people do? Practically, because I think there are people in this room who are doing incredible work. I try to do my best at the UN every day. I'm not succeeding every day, but sometimes I succeed, and many other times I don't succeed. Am I missing something?
I think that if you come to me, I would tell you that first find out what you want to do. Because this is the environment. You can only change yourself, adapt yourself, as we do in climate change. We understand, we adapt, we become resilient, and we try to mitigate. So try to mitigate the problems that are the most pressing and look at what you can do. Each one of us can make a difference, you know? And I think that the world is not such a bad place. And I totally believe in it, because the place where I work, I've spent 25 years in that region, and there are people who are very pessimistic, but I look at hope. I look at the optimism that is around. And I look at, first there weren't even schools, at least there are schools now. So once the schools have come in, then whose responsibility is it? It is the community's responsibility to send their children to school. I work on gender-based violence. We had a women's police station with men there. We did not have something which we call a one-stop center, where if there is violence happening, then you can go and you can take shelter there. We didn't have it, but you advocate for it. As I said, we are conveners, we are facilitators, we are advocates, we are service providers. We can help you if you want to help yourself. If you are not willing to walk half the mile, then nobody's going to come and, you know, walk the full distance. So I think that the change comes from within. Civil society is just a catalyst, and we have to advocate. We have to advocate so much. We have to become, we have to create these pressure groups. So going back to my project on gender-based violence, we started in 2018. In 2019, we kept on demanding. Now we have a one-stop center. We went to the police. We kept telling them, how can women feel confident of coming to this police station at 10 p.m. at night if there are only men there? I wouldn't go there because, you know, we don't have trust in the system, something which Sanjay was saying. We do not trust each other anymore. So you have to, it has to be a multi-stakeholder approach, where the community, the individual is at the center, then you build collective action within that community, then you look at good role models, you put pressure on the government, you create those pressure groups and get things changed. Like for years, Indian women have been fighting for reservation. At least it was announced in the parliament. Whether it happens in 2029, whether it happens in 2034, but at least there is a document now which others can take forward. Excellent. So I think that hope is the only way to look forward. Belief in yourself and what you want to do, patience and perseverance, and as a civil society member, passion. Excellent. If I'm passionate about something, I will ensure that we work. And we've done so much work together. We've been to very difficult areas where we didn't think that we would go and make a difference. Excellent. But it's believe in ourselves, and people have to trust us, and then together we can make a difference.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Sanjay, I almost just want to close this because she summarizes so well. And
I have a different opinion.
Let's end this discussion on a very high note.
He has a different
I have a different opinion.
I remember what you mentioned at the beginning when you said, you know, you live with her in her house, and you've just had to
in our
be
house.
Convinced.
We never do. This is mine. It's in our house.
We've had to be convinced by, you know, by her and what she says. It's incredible. Thank you so much. But Sanjay, I give you the opportunity as well. I mean,
you wanted to know what is the solution.
Yes.
I think
like
what is required is more participative democracy. Political process is missing. Civil society work alone cannot do the work that you are looking for. If there is greater political mobilization on the ground, where there are women who are stepping out, like it happens in the state that Edith goes out to work, it's called Kerala in southern India, and there's a Tamil Nadu. There is so much of women protest, there's so much, and primarily they're not seen as a threat to the state. What has begun to happen in many countries is that any kind of demonstration and protest is seen as some kind of challenge to the authority of the state. They're branded as terrorists, they're branded as all kinds of things. So one of the reasons why politics has become a bad word in these times is that people are trying to define it in a manner which never used to happen some 20, 30 years ago. Now, anything that goes contrary to the dominant narrative, which is there, propelled by a friendly media, propelled by think tanks who want to put things out in a manner that is not in consonance with what people want, then that is seen to be anti-national. So I would believe that if there is greater participation on the ground, there is real democracy, then I'm sure the change will happen more rapidly. There will be women issues which will come in, because if you look at even the 33% allocation of, for women in the parliament is a long protest, which is a long political struggle which has been going on for long years. And that is why this government has been compelled to take cognizance of it. The civil society's participation is very important. They raise issues, but they cannot impact a government beyond a point. It's politics that makes a difference, and that is where I disagree.
I don't want to make it a domestic argument, but I still want to make a point.
I think you should be having this conversation
On the side.
No, I want to just say one thing. He talks about Kerala and he talks about women's participation. Women came out, protested. There is a temple which is only for men. The women went, they said, we don't believe it. They stormed into the temple. What happened?
But it happened. It went to the court.
But what happened?
To the court.
The court. But they said women will not be allowed.
Second time. The first time.
So first time they stormed into the temple.
But the matter is still there.
But the fact of the matter is that's what I said, multi-stakeholder approach. It's not alone. Civil society alone can't do it. Community alone can't do it. Women alone can't do it. The government can't do it. You need institutional structures which support women.
Yes.
The court should have, in the first instance, quashed this and said equality starts from your temples, from your churches, from your masjids, from your mosques, wherever. If religion is going to discriminate, then despite all the hope I have in the world, it's going to be another very big struggle.
You also talked about role models.
Yeah.
So who is going to give, who is going to be the example in a community that people can
protesting without support of the ecosystem is just going to be another rally out there.
Excellent.
And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much to both of you for the discussion. Thank you so much. Incredible, really incredible worth of information and experts and expertise that this to bring. And as I mentioned, please continue this discussion at home. I think it's useful. It's incredible. Please, we have, how much time do we have, Edith? Half an hour. We have a half an hour to hear from you, your perspective, your reflections on what you just heard. I think it was just impossible to stop them from sharing, so we needed to stretch it a little longer. But please, the floor is open for your own reflections, questions. Yeah, please, go ahead. And don't be afraid also to just reflect on from your own perspective here in Europe. Please introduce yourself, or your name, and maybe the organization you represent.
Can you hear me? Sarah Emminger, Daily Newspaper.
Would you like to stand up, perhaps?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hi. Sarah Emminger. I work for the Daily Newspaper Courier for the Foreign Affairs Department. And I have a question. We see, or like there are two wars that are very much, like that get a lot of attention by Western media right now. That's the war in between Israel and Hamas, and that's the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, sure.
And my question is, how do you think these wars and the attention they're receiving might influence gender roles in like all over the world? Because it is like wars are always connected, or like militarism is always connected to, like, for example, strong men. And yeah, I'm very interested in your thoughts on that.
Should I answer?
Would you go first?
Perhaps let's see if there are a couple of others, and maybe we take two. Yes, and then we can answer together. Please, go ahead.
Hi.
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
For the online audience.
Okay. Hello.
Hi.
Thanks a lot for your input here today. I'm working in the Human Rights Department in the Austrian Foreign Ministry. And what we see a lot is a backlash in resolutions in the United Nations and in council conclusions and in many different formats on women's rights and language connected to women's rights. And now we heard a lot about solutions, about more participatory democracy and engagements on the local level. But I would be interested, what is your analysis for the roots of the problem? Why do we have this backlash in the first place? Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Let's take these two. First, on the wars that are there, probably consuming all the attention and the resources. and then the issue of the discussion on human rights and human rights issues within the UN context. What are the root causes?
So I'll try to answer the question in a manner where I'm able to put things together in a certain perspective. The war taking place in Ukraine, which I've followed very closely, and more recently the one which is taking place between Gaza and in Gaza between Israel and Hamas, besides the violence, besides the bloodshed, is also a very intense, very dense information war which is going on. Here where I think the truth is a major casualty. We don't know how it all got triggered, what is the extent. I was asking yesterday with the former diplomat about what is really happening in Ukraine. So it's a standoff, nothing really moving beyond a point. So has the war come to a stop? No, it has not come to a stop. What is really happening there? We don't know. But it continues to drain resources, continues to shift the balance of power from one side to another. There is a certain reordering of, you can say, resources, reordering of, you can say, the power structure in Europe to a large extent. Europe has been a major casualty. But what will be the major outcome? We don't know in the short term, because the US seems to have benefited quite a bit. In fact, it's become far richer at the expense of many countries in Europe. What will happen to what is happening in Gaza and Palestine? There again, you don't have the kind of information which would allow you to know for ordinary people to actually understand who did what. To start with, I know it's very clear that Hamas attacked. They attacked in the most vicious and the most cruel way, and that triggered a war. But many facts are not known about how many people died. The numbers are going up and down. Started to 1,400, brought down to 1,200. Nobody asking why it has come down to 1,200. Who are the people who have suddenly found to be alive and not dead? So there are the narratives which have been built up. There is narratives that are driving war, not information. Information is totally independent narrative. And the fact is that Archana was mentioning about some of my friends who went to Israel to cover the event, and especially in Gaza. They were herded there. They didn't really report very much. They were told what to report. And that is true of many people that you see on various channels, the broadcast and all that. So, as I said, truth is a casualty. We don't know. Maybe 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line, people will wake up to the fact that, there's been total distortion which has happened from both sides. Why then too much harm would have been done? Some people would have benefited. Maybe some arms manufacturers would have, or some oil deal may have been struck which we may not be aware of. And by then, I think too much time would have been lost.
Truth is a casualty. That's what I'm hearing from you. Thank you so much, Sanjay. What are your
No, I
reflections,
totally agree with what he has said. But for me, the outcome of this is, I look at it from the gender perspective. And I think that the situation will only worsen. And women will have to pay a price for it. And nobody's talking about it right now because everybody is so much into this war mode. We are keeping on seeing the same images. We are keeping on, provoking emotions without thinking of the consequences, because two wrongs never make a right. So if somebody has wronged and then you keep on wronging and then you think that, what you're doing is right, it's very difficult. So till we do not give war a human face, until we do not talk about the consequences of war on women, and how they will build their lives again. When you see those images of broken homes, it really, really hurts us, because we know what it takes to build a home. And when you lose your children, or you lose your husband, or you lose your home, or you lose your belongings, your life is gone. Mm-hmm. And then rebuilding is another process. And then the tragedy is that, as I was saying initially, that the social contexts are changing so fast that the requirements from civil society and the need for civil society to adapt to these everyday changing scenarios is so difficult, because we don't know. We saw the Rohingyas in Myanmar. We saw the Syria war. He was in Jordan and he was sending images of those camps there. So things are changing so rapidly, and somewhere we are just losing control to this militarization of this entire society, and where people are not having control over their lives, over their narratives. Social media is another problem for me. Given a chance, I would just not believe anything which comes in. But yes, it has its advantages. But now with this AI thing coming, where do we stop? Who is going to do the reality check? Who is going to do the fact checking? Because the information is moving so fast.
Exactly.
And amplifying, and as Sanjay said, truth is getting hidden and is a casualty to this whole thing.
Exactly.
But for me, all this is from the gender perspective, and it's going to be a very, very long journey for women to come back to their homes,
As you mentioned, you have to give war a face, and we see, and what I think, if I can take my UN hat off for a few minutes, one of the things that it really, I think, are very, very difficult also to follow and to grasp is, even when war is given a face, like in what we are seeing now,
the children
the children and the hospitals without electricity and power. What does that mean for women who are in maternity wards and all that? In some cases, war is being given a face. But then when you get to the point where decisions have to be made on what to do with that, for example, in the Security Council, again, my UN hat is completely off at this point, the decisions are not made. They're not made. Because you discussed the West versus the East. But in the UN system, you have, the Security Council versus the General Assembly. And within the Security Council, you have the Permanent Five and the rest. So there are these camps that you see everywhere. And in this case, it's very heartening to see that even when war has a face, decisions to address those atrocities are just not able to be made because of the...
But I can tell you here one thing, that every time the UN is not able to stop a war, despite a General Assembly resolution which is going in favor of ceasefire or Security Council saying whatever, the credibility of UN goes down. People stop believing in the ability of UN to do anything. I've seen it over so many years, and worse now. Like, it's all right for Secretary General to say what he said, but you also have Israel telling them to get off. That is why, and the fact of the matter is that Secretary General of UN didn't do anything. And that hurts your credibility far more. So one has to be cognizant when you make assertions that what the UN is doing, the UN is hurting itself.
He had put his UN hat off.
No, I'm just saying. I'm not wearing my UN hat on.
I always tell people...
So that's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell people that there are two United Nations. There's the United Nations in the Security Council that does not make decisions like these ones, and there's the United Nations that I work with where I cooperate with Edith and other colleagues who are in the room in different places all over the place, where we go to the field and actually see. In Kerala, we go there and see what's happening with the kids who are using drugs in Kerala. Let's try to do something. There's that UN, and then there's the UN in the Security Council. It's not a convincing argument to tell people who are not familiar with the UN system, but to be quite honest, if you look at it in that way, we know the challenges the organization is facing, incredible challenges. And people sometimes forget that the UN are the governments. The UN is not necessarily the Secretary General. No, the Secretary General is a spokesperson of the UN, but the UN is the government that created the UN. So that's the main. But it's a whole different discussion we can have another time. Any other question? Sorry, yes, the question of human rights and the root causes of these challenges we see in a discussion around human rights. Why are we seeing these issues? Backlash when you discuss women's rights and human rights in the context of the UN? Is it more the societal issues that you
I think that it's also a governmental issue because there are a lot of state-sponsored pogroms all around where human rights are being violated. And then it percolates down. And when the government doesn't speak up against any violation, then a lot of people feel that this is what is right, and they carry on with those violations. And we've seen it in so many countries, because here the state has to take responsibility. If the state closes its eyes against discrimination, against violence against women, against violence against communities, or a particular ethnic community, then I think that it's only adding fuel to fire, and people think that this is a norm. We've had instances where people have shot, made video. Again, I come to social media. Social media is also one of the reasons for deepening this divide, and also in a certain way promoting human rights violation. We've seen what happened in so many countries, when people take videos of violence, of shooting people, and put it out there and celebrate, and still action takes a couple of months, then the message that goes down is that it's fine. You will be safe, law will take its own course. And these are very, very personal instances which I don't want to talk. And that's where I feel that the society has to stand up. People have to stand up, protest, and create that kind of environment where the government has to act. Otherwise, this will continue forever. And also, I want to say about civil society, when you look at it, in this kind of scenario, the space is shrinking. The funds are not coming for the right things. They're not coming for people's welfare. They're coming for technology. They're coming for training on guns or whatever, but they're not being invested in the right place, where it is brotherhood, harmony, peace, and equality. So I think that the backlash is also because it's coming from the state.
So in many societies, I remember there was this provision of right to protect. Every time the citizens used to be under threat, the UN was mandated to act and save the citizens. But invariably what happened, that it was always the West that compelled United Nations to act in a certain direction. We saw a society, a country turned upside down, rubble over rubble, and that was Libya. And that is a time when the right to R2P was invoked against those people. But you look at it, the same problem exists in many other societies. And the UN doesn't have the ability to talk even about it, because they fear what's really going to go wrong. Because till the time you have the big five actually initiating action, nothing happens. So when we talk about how the world order has changed and what has really happened, it's a time of churning. We could talk about it in some other issue, but that is what we plan to talk when we were discussing about how this kind of conversation is going to flow. And one of the things that country like India has been demanding, and many others, is you need to change the way UN conducts itself. You need to enlarge the number of people on the Security Council. Germany had to be included. India was being also suggesting to be brought in, and also South Africa. But nothing of that nature has happened. And then you also have a major happening which is taking place primarily because the P5s refused to entertain any kind of change, and that was the coming of age of something called the BRICS. In Austria, people may not be cognizant or may not be paying much attention to it, but it's a compact which has come up in the last few years. And in September this year, it was enlarged by adding 7 more countries to the 5 countries that were there. And the basic thinking is to challenge the power of the West, to ensure that they can do many things, and to change the nature of the trade which will take place between the West and the rest. The dollar-dominated trade which was to take place, that is being challenged by a big elephant in the room called China. And China, we are not talking about it some other day, but the fact of the matter is that this is really stirring things up.
Excellent. So it seems like we don't only need education for the population, we also need, it seems like people need to be educated about politics and everything else, but how about the politicians? I think you need to be bringing more politicians in this room.
Yes.
To have a conversations with them as well, so that they're educated by the people. I think no,
Let's
it's
do
not,
a global conference with politicians.
let's do that. I think we need to do more of this so that they really are educated by the people. It seems like people need to be educated about politics and politicians, but not the other way around. I think in a democratic system, it actually has to be the other way around. So thank you so much. Edith, you're sitting next to Edith and you have a question? Sure. Please.
Hello, Samira Rauta from the People Share Foundation. I'm from Iran, and as a woman and a human rights activist, I have to agree with your words. There have to be more people going to the streets, protesting and raising their voices. This is exactly what happened almost 1 year ago in Iran. A large amount of women, they went on the streets, they even endangered their lives, and they are still sitting in the prisons of the Islamic Republic, and they were accompanied by a large number of men. But still, how is it possible that even today, the Islamic Republic is chairing the UN Human Rights Council? This is kind of, it's very much hurting, and it's kind of we feel like it's a large backslash for us.
Want to answer?
Yeah, no, I have to
think
acknowledge.
Billy will answer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I have to acknowledge what we see in front of the UN. I think you've seen, there's a sit-in, Iranian sit-in in front of the UN. I think it's been there for like more than one year. More than 1 year. I think this is the type of commitment I think you were talking about. People have to be committed to take action. When you started, when your colleagues, they started this, we thought this was going to be a few weeks, a couple of months, but it's been going on for over a year. This is really a very important commitment, I think, that you have made, and I'm sure it does send a very important message. Obviously, it's not, as you're reflecting, it's probably not achieving everything that you're asking, but any reflection on this, and then I think Edith will close this up. We have
I can answer that if you
please.
I mean, I've been to your lovely country a few times, and I have traveled around in Iran, have many friends who are Iranians, and they all feel very strongly about what is really happening. But the stranglehold of the clergy is so strong that it becomes very difficult. And also because of the kind of two different worlds that exist there. In the cities, like in Tehran, for that matter, people may be against hijab, or the chadar that they are wearing, but in the countryside, they don't have any problems. Same is in Afghanistan. I mean, the people who benefited with the changes brought in by the US, by their long stay, would only confine itself to Kabul, but not to the countryside. And if you look at it, whether it is in a democratic setup or whatever you're trying to say, it is a large number of people who reside in the countryside that really decide on which way politics will take shape, how the government is going to take action. And the tragedy of Iran is like that. Everybody in Tehran wants to leave, or Iran wants to leave the country. There was a survey which was conducted in Iran, and they found that 1 out of 2 educated person wants to leave Tehran, or Iran for that matter, because there is no hope there. But the clergy is not averse to it. They want everybody to go. All the people who can question them, they want them to go. And it's a tragedy that will not end anytime soon. And primarily they are able to make all these compromises at the international level to ensure that they remain in power. Now they are cozying up with the Chinese. Chinese are the ones who are trying to give them legitimacy. So they are able to shuffle the balls which are there in the air and continue to carry on.
Excellent.
Yeah, but I think that this is the time, because this is government, this is UN, this is international organizations, but I think that these voices need to be amplified. And I think that the international civil society organizations need to come together. And I think that the time is to stand up for each other. And we are very well aware of that young girl who's still in a coma, and just because she hadn't covered her head, and these stories are very, very depressing. But the fact of the matter is that, and this is what, I think that even the UN and even the international, the big five, have to take cognizance of the situation of women across the globe. until they do not give priority to women's concerns, we will continue to talk, we will continue to meet, and this shadow war will continue against women in different forms, different ways. Sometimes in the name of religion, as we are seeing in Iran, sometimes in the name of something else. So.
Thank you so much to both of you. Before I give you, Edith, the word to close in, I really would like to thank both of you for this incredible opportunity to engage and discuss with you. This has been really enlightening for me, eye-opening as always. I always want to be in this company because I'm also learning every day. Maybe I get an idea that I can take back to my work at the UN and do my job better. You know, and I always say, we at the UN, we cannot be successful without you people on the ground, civil society, media, NGOs, private sector. It simply is not possible. So to summarize, I think it's very good, Achena, that you mentioned, you know what, it was worse before. So there are some progress. There's much more that can be done, that there's much more that we can do, and we should do, and we must do, but there are some progress. We need, as you correctly mentioned, we need to identify our space where we can make the impact, and we need to come together. And thanks so much for bringing us together, Edith, tonight, and you will do it again, and as you've done it all the time. And we need to create and find those role models within the communities, and then this could be church leaders, religious leaders, and all that, and we need to find that. But most of all, we need to build trust, and we need to come together. Absolutely. So thank you so much to both of you for the conversation, and thank you so much for all of you. And
the news is down, you can't come up.
So much. Thank you.
So thank you so much to join this discussion, contribute to the discussion. I think this was a very enlightening dialogue. It was not just an ordinary panel. It was interactive in the best sense, where all of you gave the best of your thoughts, of your vision, of your strategy, the way forward. It was very much about the way forward. Also, we talk about distressing issues, gender-based violence, escalating wars, crisis. We hardly mentioned climate, but this is like a dark cloud, over us, and that will make many things irrelevant, when we look back at these things we could have solved. Some things we might not be able to solve if we don't act now. And listening to the two of you and also to you, Billy, I think that many of the issues you raised from the perspective of the South reflect our voices. They are our issues. So I think this is so important to realize that we're talking about us, the humanity. And we are losing it. We're losing trust in humanity. Where does it lead us? How do we educate the next generation? I'm very grateful, Billy, that you asked this question. How do we raise the children? How do we educate? How do we lose education? This is a big issue in our country now. We have a lack of teachers. Can you imagine one of the richest countries on the globe? We have a lack of teachers. We have to bring in teachers who are not trained into the classrooms. We are discussing lowering the bar, to enter university, or maybe there won't be any universities. We will be happy, a big happy Waldorf scenario, we just play and we have a good time. No, this is not work. We live in a very competitive scenario. And I think you put it so right. Patriarchy is the other cloud, that is kind of overshadowing us. Yeah, this is it. And it is about power and power sharing. And how do we push the half of the society to actually share power? And you gave many, many ideas for the way forward. And I'm happy that you were here as a UN representative, because the UN has to listen. At the moment, we have nothing better than the UN. We still try to believe in the UN system. We still try to believe in you. I think I cut it short, but I really have to say that. Billy, you are not only a UN bureaucrat or a UN program officer. You have multiple identities, and the identity I really cherish is that you worked in civil society as a civil society activist. Actually, everybody should undergo the training as a civil society activist, or a voice of civil society, or serving the community. this will change the perspective, starting with the politicians. We already had politicians in mind today, you know, how to educate the politicians. They always want to educate us. So I think we just only, there's a short window where they try to educate us. I think what is extremely important, what I learned from this conversation today, and what we all should take away, I think, what my takeaway is, that gender-based violence is not something that affects women only. Women are maybe on the receiving end, but the men, the perpetrators, are also involved in gender-based violence. We always look at one part of the equation. So when we look, I don't know, at the ongoing atrocities, name it, there was a Black Friday in Israel, for example. Yeah, I mean, there was so little empathy around the world. And there is the raging war in Hamas. There's empathy, but at the same time, it's warfare, you know? That's wrong, that's totally wrong. This is a war machinery, and people benefit from it. I think it's going in this direction of mass production of weapons. It's going in the direction of capitalism that doesn't serve the people. We all understand that our systems have to compete, we have maybe to grow, but we have to share. We can't only grow, we have to share. Now it's about thinking in this direction, what can we do in this room, each one of us. And I just want to bring one voice, I want to remember one voice of a woman from Afghanistan. We had her here at one of the open house talks, Fawzia Kofi. And she was a member of parliament in Afghanistan when the window opened and women rushed into parliament. Women came in as change makers. And we had her here and she said, please talk to us, talk with us. Don't talk about us. And this is what I understand under participatory democracy. So let's listen to each other and let's try to be change makers in this shifting global scenario. So thank you to all three of you. It was fantastic, and I invite all of you to continue the conversation. Since this is supported by the Austrian government, by the Austrian Foreign Ministry, there will be snacks and there will be drinks, and I think we can casually, usually there's just water and apple juice, but this time we can really enjoy and engage in a conversation with each other. Please use the opportunity to discuss further with our three wonderful participants. Thank you for coming. Thank you so much.
And for once, thanks to Sanjay for allowing me that space to keep on speaking. No. Sometimes when, anyway, it's over. Sometimes when I go to some panels and something and people say, how did you reach this level or whatever they think of me? And I say, oh, I was lucky in having a very nice husband. They say, why do